Welcome back, and we're doing a video ranking on Dark Souls. It's not like we've seen dozens of those before. But that aside, I had my experience with the Dark Souls trilogy and every single boss fight throughout this trilogy, even the DLCs. So I'm only going to be focusing on these three games and judging the bosses based on their challenge factor, quality, music, enjoyability on their attacks, and just how challenging and fair they can be, because for a series like this, it has plenty of its good fights, but plenty of awful ones to experience. So I'm going to be ranking them from A to F in my own tier list, since there's no S unless a boss deserves it. But with that being said, let's get right into the ranking and see how these bosses fare. First up is the Asylum Demon, C- in first boss material. This big boy is the first enemy you come across, and seeing that you can only do, well, nothing, your best option is to run away, so that way you can get fully equipped, so you can finally take down the demon and do a slam dunk on his head. But when talking about the boss itself, it's pretty basic. All he does is just slam his hammer around, butt stomps by flying in the air, and just doing hammer swipes. His attacks are pretty basic, and for a first boss, it's alright, but it's just the factor of getting introduced to this big behemoth as the first enemy you come across in the game. It's just a great start overall, and one that I really appreciate, so I would say this one is the best first boss I've seen so far into the making. So I give him a solid B. Up next is the Taurus Demon. So you come across this guy on a bridge, and this is another boss where you can do the slam dunk on his head. But on his own, it's also pretty basic, and not as interesting as the Asylum Demon. Since you're fighting on this thin bridge, movement is going to be limited, and he does have some janky hitboxes, most noticeably on his feet, which is kind of annoying to deal with. But even with all that, I still think this boss fight is just decent at best, but not really anything exciting or noteworthy to talk about overall, so C. Now we're getting into a good boss fight, the Bell Gargoyles. You get introduced to this boss, and you know that they mean business. You start fighting one gargoyle using a halberd to try to smack you about, and even using his tail to try to attack you, which you can cut off and get a weapon out of it. Kinda not worth it. But after doing enough damage to the first one, the second one will show up and start breathing fire. This is where things get really heated up, since you're dealing with two opponents, and it shows that all that matters is you need to just get good and handle two opponents at the exact same time while dealing with two different attack patterns. But it's at the point to where it's fair and manageable, not unfair and cheap. Since with the correct weapons and the good leveling up system that you have, you'll be able to manage through these two perfectly fine. Overall, I say this is a duel fight that's done pretty well, and one that I'd never expect myself to have a bit of fun with. So this is a very underrated and good boss fight that definitely keeps you on edge, and one that definitely deserves to be remembered. Solid B tier. Oh joy, the Capra Demon, everyone's most favorite boss in the entire series. Okay, this fight sucks, but seriously, no matter how many times I replay Dark Souls 1 and fight this boss, I always beat him first try. Because the issue is, Capra Demon himself isn't really that difficult to manage through. But what is difficult is the dogs. Start the fight, you get instantly jump scared by this big guy before you even take in the arena, let alone even know what the hell is going on. And you're instantly dead. And because of the dogs being one of the worst enemies to deal with, you're gonna have an annoying time trying to kill them. But once you kill him, the fight's pretty much just kinda over. Capra Demon himself is too much of a pushover to be a challenge. You can use the shield to block most of his attacks and strike him when you can. But avoiding him is just really easy. There are many other strategies people can try to come up with, but I usually just go to one side and not go to the side where the one dog is camping in the corner. Kill the dogs, and then deal with Capra himself. And all you get for your reward is Key to the Depths. That was so worth it. I don't exactly hate this boss as much as everyone else, but I still think this fight is just bad for the presentation it tried to offer. D. Now we actually have another good boss to talk about, the Gaping Dragon. At first you thought, oh, it's just a cute little lizard. Then you get greeted with this big monstrosity, and you're just like, what am I looking at? But despite the good design, the fight itself is kind of mixed for me. On one hand, it is a good boss since it has variety of attacks it will try to throw out to you, such as smacking you with its tail, flying around, charging towards you, and has a grab move. But it does suffer with some janky hitboxes on some of his attacks, like his hands, and even the grab move being a little BS. You do get a reward for cutting its tail off, even if it's a weapon that you'll never use if you get the Black Knight sword. But overall, I say this was a pretty fun boss, since it does keep you on your toes, and you have to move around and avoid its barrages of attacks and strike when you can. So I say this boss definitely is one of the more underrated ones in my opinion, and one that I enjoyed fighting against. Solid B. Oh joy, the Moonlight Butterfly. Ugh. I'm not gonna sugarcoat it, this boss sucks. It's a dull snorefest. This butterfly just shoots magic projectiles that are either a nuisance to avoid or easy to avoid. There's not much variety in its attacks, and you have to wait a good long while before it lands down just so you can hit her in the face before she does an AoE attack and just fly back up doing the same repeated, boring nonsense again and again. It's dull as hell. And the only way you can make the fight go by faster is if you have black fire bombs with you, just to make the fight go by a bit quickly. But who even plays this game with a range build? Not many people, and based on my opinion, Moonlight Butterfly sucks. And just not really worth the hassle of fighting against, I guess. F. Now, we got ourselves a good boss, and one of my favorites, that being Great Grey Wolf Sif. And honestly, I didn't really want to fight this boss, but you're required to fight Sif in order to even fight the Four Kings, and it just makes me feel bad considering Sif's duty is to protect her master Artorias. But things just don't go as planned. You do get an alternate cutscene if you do finish the DLC, and Sif will recognize you, but no matter what, you still have to fight regardless, even if you don't want to. And the fight itself, Sif will punish you if you try to play passively, so you have to get all up close and try to avoid her swings. I'm even surprised a dog can even hold a sword that big. And try to avoid getting hit by her sword attacks. It's really depressing for me to fight this dog because I love dogs, I love cats, but this, like, I hate you, FromSoft, for making me do this, especially when she starts limping at low health and her attacks become stiff. It makes me feel bad that I have to put this dog down, but that's just the way Dark Souls goes, and honestly, Sif deserves the credit for at least trying to give me a fight. A. Up next is a boss that has the best cutscene in the game. Hope you like that scene because that's as much as you're gonna get. Chaos Witch Quelaag is a pretty good boss fight in my opinion. She does have various attacks that comes from the spider, such as puking out lava and using the legs to stab you, I guess. I don't know. But she does use attacks of her own, such as swinging her sword around and trying to hit you. The bug also has one attack that I don't like, and that's being the AoE. Whenever she hugs the spider will explode. I'm not a fan of this attack because it kind of comes out a bit too quickly, and if you're up close and personal on the spider, you'll get screwed over by this explosion. But on her own, she definitely puts up a solid fight with her various attacks that she'll throw out, and definitely not a bad challenge overall. As much as I want to put an A tier, that AoE did screw me over during my original playthrough, but for some reason she rarely used it in the remaster. AI changes or something? I don't know, I can't make sense of any of these bosses in these games. B tier. This boss might as well just be free souls. Ceaseless Discharge is pretty much a nothing boss overall. I will say, it is kinda cool that he doesn't attack you instantly upon entering his arena. It's only when you grab these items right here, since that's his dead sister you're raiding off of, and he will start attacking you. But I always go for the cheese strat, since it's much quicker and easier to get this fight out of the way than just fighting him normally, since his attacks are very slow and easy to avoid. It's just dull and boring. I just have nothing positive to say about Ceaseless Discharge. Just thank you for the free souls, but it's kind of required to fight him just to get access to the demon ruins. And honestly, just always go for the cheese strat. Don't bother fighting him normally. It's not worth the patience or the hassle, even if you have better weapons. F.
Hi kids, we all heard you liked the Asylum Demon. Well, luckily for you, we got a brand new version in the Asylum Underground, introducing the Stray Demon. Well, what's the difference? Well, you see, he actually has different attacks and an AoE move.
What's the point of this thing? It's kinda cool that you get to see him during the beginning of the game, but there's nothing positive about this boss. It's just a lazy reskin that just exists as free souls, constantly spamming AoE, which is annoying to deal with, and you're forced to take fall damage. Great! It's just a really lame, pathetic excuse of a boss. Nothing positive. You might well not even add this thing here anyway. F. Iron Golem is one of those bosses that can either be enjoyable to fight against or just over with too quickly. The Golem's moveset is pretty simple and basic. He uses his axe to slam you around, stomp around, but I really don't like that grab move he does. I swear that move has some janky hitboxes where even when I'm behind him, it still gets me. It's annoying, but it's like Optimus Prime once said in Transformers Devastation,
If it grabs me, I am done for.
So it's recommended to avoid that move. However, despite the limited movesets and the cool idea of fighting a golem on top of Zen's fortress, the golem, however, has a couple issues, where once you stagger him, he's kind of out of commission for a good long while and just letting you get in a lot of free hits, making the fight kinda easy and not really that exciting. Or you can have the excitement of making him fall to his death. That never gets old. But overall, this is a decent boss on his own, even with the staggering, and one that I find myself enjoying a little bit. It's definitely worth the hassle of going through Zen's fortress. C. Oh joy, it's time to talk about the most iconic boss in all of Dark Souls 2. Ornstein and Smo. You get introduced to these two, and yeah, you're gonna have a bad time with these two. These two are one of the hardest bosses I've dealt with in the game, and for many reasons. You have to deal with Ornstein being fast and aggressive, with his charge attacks and using that spear of his while shooting lightning as well. Smo will try to charge in towards you with his massive hammer that can literally hurt. This big guy will constantly either haul an ass or you'll have to take the opportunities to attack him while Ornstein gets stuck behind pillars. These two work differently in terms of their attack moves, and striking them when you have the chance is tricky. However, there is one extra gimmick. Upon beating one of them, the other one will be powered up by the other's abilities. If you kill Smo first, Ornstein will become giant and have long-range attacks as well as a stomp move that really hurts. As for Smo, well, nothing really special happens for him. All he gets is just a butt stomp move. His weapon doesn't shoot electricity or anything. The second phases for both of these is average at best, but it's just the idea of these two being powered up by one's special abilities and the way they show how much they respect each other. But overall, this fight will definitely keep you on your toes, and this will be the true turning point to see if you are ready for the second half of the game. Because trust me, these two will serve as the biggest major roadblock you will come across. I give this fight an A. Although sadly, most of the second half of the bosses in the game aren't really anything impressive. Such is the case of Dark Sun Gwendolyn. You have the choice of fighting him or joining his covenant, but once you fight him, it's a dull, boring encounter. All Gwendolyn does is just shoot out magic projectiles at you, ones that can go through pillars, ones that are magic missiles, or even shooting from his crossbow. Upon getting close to him, he will teleport away, but that's your opportunities to attack him. The fight is just a dull snore fest, but thankfully he doesn't have a lot of health, so you aren't stuck in this battle for way too long. There is a limit if you drag this fight out for 5 minutes where the hallway isn't infinite, but who honestly would want to do that? Not me. I just want to get this fight over with. So thank you for the free souls, Gwendolyn. D. Up next is another forgettable boss, Crossbreed Priscilla. Yeah, I don't see this lady as waifu material. Upon entering the painted world, you have the option to either attack her or just leave. I would attack her since I went through all this nonsense for something. But honestly, the fight itself, like I said, forgettable. All she does is go invisible, and you have to search for her footsteps in the snow while avoiding her attacks just to attack her. You can make her visible upon doing enough damage, and honestly, cutting her tail off is a bit more tricky than actually fighting her because her attack move set is very, very basic and easy to avoid. The most amount she can do with her weapon is inflict bleed, but you would have to try to get hit by her even while she's invisible. Overall, it's just a nothing boss and one that I definitely want to put down and just get out of the way, because screw the painted world. D. And here we have the biggest joke in the entire series, Pinwheel. Honestly, I question why they put this guy in one of the hardest and most annoying areas in the game, but to each their own, I guess. Pinwheel has a good design and good music, but the fight is easy. He's just a little dessert, a real reward for you to take down just to get out of the way for an item that's useful. But honestly, that's pretty much all Pinwheel is known for. He's just the punching bag of the series. All he really does is clone himself and shoot out fireballs and fire breath. That's pretty much all he can do, even if you keep him alive and long enough. Things will get chaotic the more you progress into the fight, but that is if you don't have an overpowered weapon to make him so easy, since the fight's just over in about like 10 seconds. Sorry, Pinwheel, as much as I want to give you the chance, but the area you're located in is garbage, so D. Now we get to talk about one of the four major lord bosses that we come across in this game. Since they're pretty much required to be in order to fight the final boss, it's best to talk about them. And honestly, I just want to get Grave Lord Nito out of the way since he kinda sucks. He does have a cool design, interesting lore, and nice music, but his boss fight is so underwhelming. Reason being, the skeletons. Since they're there, they make the fight annoying since Nito has very limited attacks such as sword swiping and AoE that can kill the skeletons, which is pretty useful. He even has giant ones behind him that you don't want to aggro because that just makes the fight more of a headache. Also, you'll just have more trouble dealing with the skeletons than Nito himself since he's just pretty much a pushover. That's kind of my problem with the second half of this game, is that most of the other later bosses just become a pushover, and it sucks since they have cool designs just like Nito, but they could have made Nito less of a pushover and more of a challenge if they didn't want to add skeletons into the fight. D.
Hi kids, we all heard how much you like the Stray Demon. Well, luckily for you, we have another brand new version. Introducing the Demon Fire Sage. What's the difference? Well, you see, Stray Demon was colored green, but this one is orange and has fire effects.
Okay, this is getting old. The demon or the joke? Both. Yeah, fair enough. Honestly, what can I say? It's literally Stray Demon. He has the exact same attacks, a worse arena, more annoying to deal with, and it's just a lazy reskin. Again! There's nothing creative about this boss. You can literally tell this area suffered from rushed development. Honestly, what else can I really say? This fight sucks. Trash. F. Well, it's not like the next boss to follow up afterwards was any better. Centipede Demon is just another mediocre boss. On his own, his attack moves isn't really anything special, him just jumping around and slamming down on the ground, having a grab move, and using his centipede arms to stretch out and hit you. But what's the issue? The arena. Since you're surrounded by lava, you're going to be taking a lot of damage if you get caught in that, and trying to fight him in this awkward, cramped arena, even if you try to move to a different one, isn't really exciting since the boss itself is just really not that fun. It would have been nice if we got the orange charge ring from killing Demon Fire Sage, rather than killing this thing, let alone cutting off one of his tails. But as is, this fight's just a load of nothing, and goes to show that, yeah, this area really suffered with rushed development. D. Oh joy, it's time for me to talk about the best boss in the entire game. One that has been such a huge fan favorite that everyone loved, everyone talks about, and definitely didn't hate enough. The Bed of Chaos. There is so much love to be had with this boss that it's just amazing. A massive fan base. Heck, I'm just one of the few people that really loves this boss so much. Definitely one of the biggest highlights in the series. Okay, let's be serious. This boss fucking sucks. This boss is just one of the most questionable things ever to exist. At first, I didn't see the issue of it. That is until the floor started crumbling around me, and the frickin' hands just smack you into the pit that just instant kills you. The run back is also tedious, and doing the boss's gimmick isn't really that fun when it spews fire all over the place, and the fear of fucking falling to your death, all because this giant monster wants to smack you into these death pits, makes it so risky to even go after the anchors, and all that awaits you in the middle of it is a tiny little slug that dies in one hit. Wow, lamest boss ever. However, there is a couple positives I can at least say about the Bed of Chaos. Its run back isn't really that horrible since the enemies aren't much of a nuisance, and secondly being the anchors. Once they're destroyed, they are destroyed
Permanently!
and you don't have to re-destroy them again. Thankfully for that. But even then, this boss fight is just ass. It's so garbage. There's nothing positive or fun about the Bed of Chaos aside from the things I mentioned, so it deserves to rot in F tier for all I care. Up next is probably the best out of the 4 lords, in my opinion, that being the 4 kings. But even that's kind of a bit of a stretch. Honestly, I only like these guys because these guys don't have annoying gimmicks or frustratingly annoying or just underwhelming to fight against. 4 kings is, as you put it, 4 kings. You fight in the abyss, and you have to deal with 4 of them. But you can deal with 1 at a time if you're quick enough to take them down. This fight is mostly a DPS check to see if you are strong enough to tank their moves and powerful enough to kill them quickly. Because 4 kings themselves aren't really anything noteworthy upon their attacks. Simple swipes, pokes, backhands, annoying grab moves to deal with, and they have this projectile magic attack that's a nuisance to avoid since it locks on to you and just lingers around until it finally hits you. You're gonna have a tough time dealing with the 4 kings, but if you're quick enough to kill at least one of them, then the next ones shouldn't be too much of a hassle to deal with. So overall, I say it's a cool and enjoyable boss, but compared to the other 4 lords I have to deal with, this is the best as I can praise it. B. And for the last lord to deal with is Seath the Scaleless. And just like with Nito, he's a pushover. You do confront him for the first time in a forced loss situation, but you do get to confront him again in the Crystal Caves. And at the start of the fight, you have to destroy this crystal. Why is there a crystal there? All it does is just make him immune to your attacks, but what's even the point? They could have done a little bit more than just toss this one little gimmick that you can just deal with and forget about it. Because on his own, Seath is very underwhelming. His ice attacks will inflict curse upon you, an annoying AoE move that just hits from a distance, and he just moves and does stuff? I don't know, flares around? And the music is just kind of annoying. I'm not a fan of this guy's boss theme. It's just one of the most confusing boss fights ever. You'll have a tough time just trying to cut his tail, let alone get around him. But on his own, he's just really underwhelming and not really that fun to fight against. You'd think a dragon this big would put up more of a fight, but apparently not. At least, the only positive side is once I beat him, I don't have to go through the Crystal Caves again, since that area sucks. But they could have at least done more with Seath in this boss fight. Just saying. So, D. Before we talk about the final boss, let's talk about the DLC. Since I recommend going after the DLC before you fight the final boss, or else you'll be taken to New Game Plus. And since the DLC has 4 bosses, this won't be long to cover. So, start of the DLC, we actually get tossed into a boss battle. And the first up being the Sanctuary Guardian. This weird Chimera Manticore beast is your first opposing threat they have to deal with. And for first DLC boss, it is the weakest of the 4, but still a good fight. This beast is fast, aggressive, shooting lightning bolts at you, and means business. But luckily this pauses in between its attacks that you can avoid and get opportunities to hurt him. He doesn't have a lot of health if you have powerful weapons, so the fight is pretty manageable, but man, this thing's a beast. It goes all out with his melee attacks and is super aggressive. But you have to be wary on your toes and try to avoid his attacks while trying to get opportunities to strike him down. Overall, this boss definitely fits perfectly with this game's clunky control movement. It manages to be aggressive, but pretty fair and tough to manage through. So I'll give the game this good amount of credit for giving us a very solid introduction DLC boss. B tier. Now we get to one of the best DLC bosses and the best one in the whole game, Knight Artorias. Upon greeting this warrior, you'll see that he is getting corrupted by the Abyss. Now a fallen hero with a broken, crippled arm with only one thing in his mind because of the Abyss: to kill you. And Knight Artorias is no pushover. This guy is fast, aggressive with his sword combos, his sword swings, his jumping attacks, his massive AoE blast that makes him much aggressive than he already is, and even putting that crippled arm to good use. This guy is difficult to manage through, and will require perfect timing dodges in order to manage through his attacks. Luckily, he's fair enough to where you can get opportunities to strike him, but you have to be quick, because he will punish you heavily. I do recommend disrupting his AoE attack, since I swear every time I fight him, he gets super aggressive when I let him activate it. But I don't know why. Either way, he manages to be very quick and agile, tough but fair at the exact same time, and does play out well with this game's clunky movement, which is one thing I really appreciate for the DLC, since most of the bosses in the base game were complete pushovers, but thankfully the DLC actually gives us some very tough and difficult bosses to manage through. Honestly, his boss theme is not really that memorable in my opinion, but at least the fight is actually worthwhile and one that I really had some fun fighting against despite my rage in my playthrough. So, A tier. Now it's time to talk about the final boss of the DLC, Manus. He pulls you in through the portal since the start of the DLC, and you get ready to face him in one final duel. For a beast boss, he actually does a fairly solid job at being a tough challenge. My only complaint with the fight is his spaz attack. Whenever he does it, you will get comboed and punished heavily. It kinda comes out a bit too quickly for me to avoid and to dodge out of the way, and he just does it at random. It's the only attack I don't like because most of his other moves are actually fairly decent. You can avoid his various slaps, his various attacks from his staff, jumping moves, heck, even the magic missiles aren't really that bad if you have the silver pendant. But avoiding the ones that rain down from the sky, and the ones where he circles them around onto himself, aren't really that bad to avoid. But definitely keep the silver pendant since they do a lot of damage. This boss is tough. Easily one of the toughest fights I faced in the game, and man, it was definitely something. If only his spaz attacks didn't really have a short time for you to avoid, then I would consider this to be a awesome boss battle. But for a final boss of the DLC, it does a good job. Far better than the base game's final boss in my opinion. Definitely an A tier fight. Despite talking about the final boss, there is one more boss for us to tackle, that being the optional fight against Calamite. You get greeted to this dragon during the start of the DLC, and you're curious on if you want to fight him. So upon going down to this one location, you get to see Calamite and test your mettle. If you want to, I heard he's very brutal, but I didn't get the opportunity to face him myself in that moment. But if you manage to get a key, you get to talk to Goth, and he'll help you in weakening Calamite, so that way you have a chance of actually beating him. And upon doing this, the fight begins. And this is the only good dragon boss in the entire game, as opposed to the others being decent or just existing. But for Calamite, he manages to bring out a fun challenge with his dragon-like attacks, especially his cool flame attacks, his aggressive stomps, and that one move that does more damage to your ears than it does to your health. Jeez, why? And he does fly around, but upon his wing being injured, he doesn't fully fly to where it's completely unfair. It's manageable to avoid his various AoE attacks and his charge moves. So overall, I say this was a pretty good boss fight, and one that I really enjoyed fighting against. Especially for an optional boss, I say it's worth the hassle of fighting, and one that definitely stands out as one of the better dragon fights in the series, at least until I get to the other games. So I give him a solid B tier, at least for me. Now, we get to the final boss of the base game, Gwen, Lord of Cinder. You hear about the stories of Gwen since the start of the game, and he's your final opponent you have to face. In order to confront him, you have to beat all the other 4 lords, use their souls to get access to the location where Gwen is at. And you confront the old man, all hollowed out, just a shell of his former self. And for the final boss of the game, he's decent, I guess. My problem with Gwen is his certain attack moves. He's a bit too aggressive. His one-handed move swing that he throws out just comes out so quickly that how are you supposed to try to dodge that? And every time you try to heal, he'll also charge towards you and undo your healing, even attacking you through the frickin' pillars. That's a little unfair. That's my only gripes with this boss. Sure, you may argue that bosses like Artorias and Menace were aggressive, but at least they had pauses in between their combos and had attacks that are reactive enough. With Gwen, he does have reactive attacks, but when he does that one-handed swing move, it just comes out so quickly that you get stun-locked by it. It's why it sucks that I have to play a freaking like a coward and just hide behind the rocks and get my opportunities to hurt him. Thankfully, he does stagger, giving you opportunities, and his grab move is easy to avoid, because on his own, it's a decent enough final boss to end the game, but I just wish it was a little bit better, in my opinion, because I would rank it higher up on the list. But as is, it still stands out being one of the few final bosses that I don't mind, so B tier. Well, I guess that's the end of Dark Souls 1, but don't worry, this video is not over since I'm covering the other 2 games in the series. So let's go to Dark Souls 2.